So I get to talk with you today about healing from sex addiction and betrayal trauma as a couple, healing the coupleship. And I'm going to do that by sharing some features. There's no way that in the next 50 minutes or so that I'm going to cover all of it, but I want to share with you a model that I developed called couple-centered recovery, talk with you a little bit about what that is, where it came from, and hopefully give you some really practical tools that you can use to heal your relationship after the discovery of betrayal and as you recover from sex addiction and betrayal trauma. All right, so let's jump right in here and get started. It all came really from this simple idea that it wasn't from this quote, but when I heard this quote, I was like, yeah, that's it. That's where this idea came from. And it's from Harville Hendricks, who's a pretty well-known marriage and family therapist, wrote some good books and stuff. He said this: we are born in relationship, we are wounded in relationship, and we can be healed in relationship. And I think that's right. And sometimes I give presentations that draw from affective neuroscience and neurobiology and developmental psychology, and I'm all into that. I geek out to that stuff, and I think it's pretty clear that we as human beings, we are wired for relationship. We are created for connection, and even as a person of faith, I believe that theologically we bear the image of a God who exists as relationship and in relationship. And so I think this is true. Now, I was trained and also had my own personal recovery experience in what I refer to as the traditional model, a 12-step model, which is, and I don't mean this in a bad way, in a judgmental way. I'm being descriptive as I see it. It's addict centered though, and I want to be really, really clear about something here. A lot of people, they look back at the way things used to be done and they have a lot of anger, and I can understand that, especially for those who are really hurt by it. But I also know, because I know a lot of the people who established these traditional models for sex addiction, like Dr. Patrick Carnes. I trained under him when I started my CSAT training. And, I feel like I know their hearts, and they were doing the best they could. And I think we're indebted to those who have gone before us. I mean, I've seen clips of Patrick Carnes on the Phil Donahue show in the 80s, and he's just getting just ripped up for claiming that sex could be addictive. I mean, this was a radical idea, and a lot of folks, they really put themselves out there vulnerably, and they took risk. And what they did was they took existing models of addiction, and they applied it to this reality that they were recognizing, that sex can be addictive and compulsive. Now, the problem with that is that these existing models conceptualize of the partners of addicts as being either co-addicts or codependents. Sometimes those used interchangeably, sometimes some differentiation there, but regardless, so it was the AA model, essentially Alcoholics Anonymous model, and the Al-Anon model for the partners of alcoholics. It was just imported over, and it makes sense to me why that happened. That was an existing model that worked with an existing and well-established addiction. And so they took that and they kind of blazed this trail using that as a framework for those suffering with sex addiction. And a lot of good work was done. There was some great research shown that recovery was possible. And typically the time frame, I was trained for this time frame in my CSAT training, 3 to 5 years of intense work. Now, I also want to say, there's been incredible evolution and growth within the folks who first, established these models, such that now the CSAT training, even now, 11 years after I did it, it looks completely different when it comes to partner trauma. Completely different. We didn't even talk much about partner trauma when I did it. Now it's huge. It's woven throughout the course. And IITAP, the International Institute for Trauma and Addiction Professionals, which is the credentialing agency for CSATs, now has a whole certification just around partner trauma, the CPTT certification and those trainings. And that's coming a long way from a time when there were women, and I've met them. I've met some of these women who, say in the 90s, their husbands, went off to this, 30-day, 60-day sex addiction rehab, and they get a phone call one Saturday afternoon. It's their regular time for a phone call from their husband, and they receive a disclosure, totally unprepared, no heads up, just by phone. And then, then they hang up the phone. Like, that was happening. We've come a long way since then. But still, this traditional model is out there. It's embedded for a lot of folks in the 12-step culture and that kind of thing. Now, there was a much needed correction that happened with the partner trauma model. So here we have a trauma-informed model. Yay, this is a good thing. And the partner trauma model, as an answer to the traditional model, the partner trauma model is partner-centered. And it was in the 2000s, the mid-2000s, that research began to emerge on betrayed partners and PTSD symptoms. Barbara Steffens, actually, her PhD dissertation was, the way I describe it is like a bomb went off in the field. And it compelled a change in the way that partners of addicts are conceptualized and treated. And it just showed, I think, very clearly that many partners of addicts had been wrongly pathologized as co-addicts or codependents, or even having borderline personality disorder. And, excruciatingly painful and slow to come to terms with this reality for the partners themselves. But what I want to point out is that this field in general is pretty new. Okay. Patrick Carnes is writing about this in the 80s. It's not until like 2000 that he establishes the CSAT training. So it's a pretty new field in terms of, like the wider field of psychology and professional counseling and psychotherapy. And the idea of partner trauma is even newer. I mean, we're talking less than 2 decades, really, at this point. But it's already, because it's such a powerful, compelling, and once you see the evidence, I think obvious reality, it's already just radically changing the field in a much needed way. And as I say here on this slide, this much needed correction to the field rightly emphasized the need for safety and stability for partners of addicts. Okay. What I hope is that couple-centered recovery is a synthesis and a progression that brings the best of all what that we know together, and hopefully improves upon it in a way that advances the field forward. And so here we have a trauma-informed approach, but rather than being addict-centered or partner-centered, it is relationally centered. Now, that does not mean that there's not a period of time where we tend to emphasize the needs of the betrayed partner first. But it's not merely for the sake of the betrayed partner. It's for the sake of the relationship, because any relationship where there's been disempowerment, gaslighting, where there has been a power differential that is unhealthy, a power dynamic that is unhealthy, righting that is not just a matter of justice, but health for the relationship as well as both people who are a part of it. So this is a relationship-centered approach.